we chose to study was domestic violence. The problem, which will be the definition, which domestic violence is defined as a violent or aggressive behavior within the home that involves the abuse of a spouse or a significant other.
Well, in a scientific kind of perspective, I did multiple statistics research to bring all this stuff together to see what's happening and how it's happening. Well, in the broad perspective, 2 to 4 people per minute suffer from domestic violence, and that's all over the world. But right now we're focusing on America, and with the size of America, that's actually pretty big. But the problem with America is that it's literally a whole group of different types of people in their different cultures. So finding statistics for different cultures was interesting enough, but basically the different cultures have different ways of dealing with this problem and how they have standards for this problem. And well, with that, it's kind of hard to find cases for this problem that actually are presented in itself. But the cases we do receive are pretty big and pretty wide, and we receive multiple of them multiple times a year, a lot of times a year. And that can have an effect on not only the people in the victim and persecutor that relationship, but it also affect the people around them, such as neighbors, children, and other types of family.
Okay, so with the political and historical lens, I focus more on policy and legislation, court cases, and things such as that. One of those biggest piece of policy were the Violence Against Women Act, which was initiated in 1994, which made domestic violence it had more of an appearance in political circles and courts. It was just ratified and redone in 2013. So they included the LGBT communities and other cultural circles. They included immigrants so that they could have access to programs that helped them with domestic violence cases, and they had access to courts and other resources. Another piece of policy was the domestic violence offender gun ban, which was initiated in 1997, which essentially kept misdemeanor offenders from having guns, and therefore kept them away from any other violent attempts. That also kept them, it gave them an automatic ban from their spouse or the person that they were abusing. In terms of the state powers, state officials like the Virginia government, Bob McDonnell, he did a lot of work in terms of human trafficking, abuse on college campuses, and domestic violence in homes and how it affects students in other cultural circles. He's a great example of how legislators can initiate different types of policy to help these people and these victims. But in terms of them getting to the courts, one needs to be reminded that the powers of the justices is almost unlimited in terms of their power in the victims' lives and changing the lives of the children who are affected. Christopher Mirasolo is a great example of that as well. The Michigan State Department of Corrections was the one who handled his case. He was the father of the woman he had raped. So the judge, Gregory S. Ross, he actually gave him permission to have custody of that child, even though he was a convicted rapist. This shows the almost unlimited power that these judges have. And though his case got thrown out, and though the judge was disbarred, this was one of many cases that have been pushed through our court system, and one of many cases where the victim was further damaged and no one had justice.
So the effects of domestic violence, it's not only just for the victim, but it's also for the perpetrator, and in some cases there's a bystander, considering that most abuse happens between a spouse and their husband or whoever. So it's in the home, so most bystanders in most cases are children, and 8.6% of children are affected within the home. So, and like the different ways that they're affected, they can be affected emotionally, which includes anxiety and fear and just just certain emotions, you know, like when the perpetrator pulls up in the driveway, you know, they'll have fear, like, what's going to happen when he walks through the door, and then perpetrators are affected. They can face monetary fines, they can face the loss of their job if they have to go to jail. Jail's also an effect of it, and then the victims are affected. They can also lose their jobs. They can suffer physically by like bruises and cuts, and then it can also lower their self-worth. So.
Culturally, different cultures view domestic violence differently because there are so many cultures in America as a whole, and they view domestic violence as different things in different homes. Like in the African American community, most times they will not report domestic violence because they want to keep their men and the perpetrators out of jail, out of like a cultural sense of things, to protect other African Americans. Latinos and Latinas, tend to keep domestic violence on the down low because sometimes they will have no one to turn to and have nowhere to go and be like, hey, and say, this is happening at my house, I need help. Also, it's not just limited to the female counterpart. There are females who commit domestic violence crimes against their husbands, and it's not just limited to adults, it also happens to children. And also, in all the cultures that I looked at, it's not talked about a lot. It is seen as something that is shameful and something that the victim should be ashamed of and not have to talk about. Solutions. Well, our 3 general solutions. The first one is providing education on these issues of domestic violence in the home, how to escape it, etc., etc.
A second solution was essentially advocating and getting legislation passed. The legislation that's in place now, it has to be changed, it has to be ratified to fit the times that are changing. Loopholes that were created are affect victims in a very big way, as the case that Judge Gregory Ross presided over, and we definitely need to look at those cases.
Our last solution would be safe houses and programs. Yes, we already have those, but I think that there could be more things that are done for the victims and for the victim's family, such as monetary, because some of the women who get or men who get domestically abused are staying with their partner because of monetary issues, because they can't go out and work themselves, or they have limitations to where they can't go out and work themselves. And so once they finally get a chance to escape their partner, they won't have the money to provide for themselves and their children.
Okay, Amani, having finished your project, what, if anything, would you consider to be a gap in your team's research that, if addressed, would make you feel more confident about your conclusion?
A gap that we have is that our different viewpoints, we tried to connect them in the PowerPoint, and I think if we just worked on trying to get them connected a little bit more, I would feel really, really confident about how we presented.
Brianna, in what way did you improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
Understanding each of them's lenses and being able to communicate with them and to back up some of our facts more stronger with the statistics, it really helped me be able to work with the group better.
Michaelan, how did you decide to include Brianna's perspective, lens, or conclusions into the overall presentation?
Well, her lens was futuristic, and when you think of a problem, we always have to think of the future of the problem and what it can lead to, and how it can have effect in the future. So when you put all of our layers together, hers was basically the end project of what could happen, what's going to happen if we either fix the problem or not.
Sophia, in the future, what change would you make to your group norms, and how would you expect that to improve your team presentation?
Well, I would say that collaboration is a big, important piece of that. If we were to improve on how we had collaborated on the presentation, I feel like us coming together with our lenses a lot better, that would definitely increase achievement.
Dallas, reflecting on all of your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that your group identified?
I would say Sophia's did because of the organizations and bills that she brought up for preventing it or for the help of victims and perpetrators.